Welcome to Tuesday, October 17th, 2023. Your Day Weather Podcast brought to you by Cowboy State Daily. Check them out at cowboystatedaily.com. Cowboy State Daily is Wyoming's only digital newspaper. Subscribe to the daily digital newsletter at cowboystatedaily.com. We're going to have another nice day. So it'll be nice again, but we have a fast-moving cold front that'll cause some windy areas, but it's not much of a front. Not a lot of moisture with it. So ahead of the front, another nice day for just about everybody, but winds are going to be picking up later today and tonight. It'll be windy on Wednesday. Nothing terrible, just a nuisance wind. The winds will be strongest across Montana, up into the Dakotas, parts of eastern Wyoming and Colorado. Then that front goes by and we go right back to fair weather again, Thursday through Sunday. So another nice stretch coming here at the end of the week through the weekend. Pattern change is coming next week. The writing is on the wall that next week is going to turn colder and unsettled. Now the devil will be in the details, and there are a lot of details we just don't know yet, but I can tell you that next week is going to be a lot different. Take advantage of this week. As colder weather's coming next week, there's going to be rain and snow chances in the west next week, especially mid to late in the week. Also, we've got an El Nino and also what's called an MEI update. We'll talk about that at the end of the podcast. Some great photos still coming on in. Now, this was a while ago, September 19th, up in northwestern Wyoming, not far from the Cody area. Just some beautiful fall colors. Thanks, Vince, for sending that in. And then still getting some photos from the Eclipse coming on in. Some great shadows. A lot of folks noticed the shadows reflecting the eclipse on the ground and other things. That just a really neat event with that eclipse over this past weekend. The satellite imagery this morning shows that low that was out here over British Columbia yesterday is moving right along the U.S.-Canadian border, basically heading east first, straddling the U.S.-Canadian border, then turning southeast later on into the upper Midwest with high pressure right overhead. So that's going to mean another sunny, fair day today. And there you can see the low. By tomorrow, it tracks very quickly southeast into southwest Minnesota. Northwest winds aloft will bring in cooler air. Northwest winds aloft are strong. That's what's going to make for some breezy areas. Most of the shower activity will straddle the U.S.-Canadian border along the track of that low as it heads into these areas here. So you can see that Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and the upper Midwest, some showers in the Pacific Northwest, but high pressure here just basically acts like a shield and keeps any real significant precipitation out of the region here for the next several days in a row. We mentioned wind along the front range of Montana, up around Great Falls, Helena. You're going to see out in the plains some very strong and gusty winds. Strong and gusty winds along the lee side of the mountains from Cody to Meeteetse, down there to the east side of the Wind Rivers. Southeastern Wyoming, going to see some winds, some strong winds out here. So it is going to be a little on the windy side as this front comes on through. But it's a quick mover, and this is by Saturday. Generally speaking, a broad area of high pressure over the west. So for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and probably Sunday, we'll see some good weather. Notice this little low right here. This area of low pressure will probably push in late Monday and Tuesday, bringing some showers to the Pacific Northwest and maybe the Intermountain West, but it won't be the main player. That's coming up back here on the back side of this pattern, and this is what we see developing. By Monday, high pressure begins to become well established, and we start to see a digging trough come into the west. The question will be, will it dig towards the Four Corners? Will it form more over the central and northern Rockies, somewhere in between? One thing is we know and have high confidence in, we're going to have an area of low pressure over the far western areas of the United States by the middle to the end of next week. But we don't know where exactly it's going to track, and where it tracks will be a big player in terms of the heaviest precipitation and the coldest weather. But a late October pattern like this means rain and snow and colder weather for parts of the west. We just have to sort out where. But the changes are coming next week. We're very confident of that change that will be coming. And also, we see a change in the longer term, meaning several weeks out. Now, during the cold season, we tend to show you maps that look like this, or graphs that look like this. For those of you new to the podcast, we call these teleconnections, to where you're able to look at very large-scale patterns across the northern hemisphere during the cold season that give you signals of what's to come later. One of these is what's called the East Pacific Oscillation, where the high pressure systems and low pressure systems are configured across the Pacific Ocean that tend to signal when we have warmer and colder periods. This zero line here is we use it as a point of reference, but when we go below this zero line, this Eastern Pacific Oscillation, when it goes into a negative phase, that is a C. That is a cold signal for the Western United States. And from the European model here, notice that as we get into this weekend and especially next week, and then as we get through, this is November 1st right here. So for the last days of October into right up into November, we are in a strong negative phase of the Eastern Pacific Oscillation. That's a cold signal. So the change that we see developing next week means other changes after that as well that are colder. That's why we've been hinting that you really want to take advantage of this good weather that we've got going on now. Also, this is something we're going to refer back to at a podcast here in the near future. The JMA, or the model that comes from the Japan Meteorological Agency, is showing this is their winter forecast for December, January, and February at 500 millibars. What I want to show you here is you see this blue area here over the central areas of the eastern United States, this blue area here from the southwestern United States out across the Pacific, and this warmer area here. Think of these blue areas as areas of low pressure and cooler wet weather, this area of high pressure near the Gulf of Alaska. Long term, this is a colder active pattern as well that the JMA model is seen in the long term. So cold signals are beginning to show up. Let's take a look now at the current El Nino status. Here you can see the warmer than average sea surface temperature anomaly that's out across the Pacific, west of South America, stretching across the subtropical Pacific there. So we have an El Nino, which we all know, reverse of where we were a year ago. So you can see if we were to graph the cold phases and the warm phases of the subtropical Pacific from 1982 to where we are now, January 20, earlier this year to where we are now, you can see the warm phase that we're in after that prolonged La Nina that we had right here. You can see that we go through these cycles. And then as you take a look at what the prediction is, this is September, October, November. So this is March, April, and May to give you reference. Notice we're going to have a 100% chance of an El Nino. And then as we get into the early winter season, then into spring, and then as we get into early summer, what it's showing is that El Nino will be reaching its peak and then starting to fade. And a chance, 50-50 chance or better than that, by late spring and early summer, we're out of the El Nino and into a neutral phase. And we see that in the long-range modeling as well. You see it's kind of peaking here right at the end of the year and going downward. So as we see in the long-term trends and what we have hinted at, we talked about this in our long-range forecast, that we weren't going to see this as a super El Nino. There's a lot of press that we were going to have a super El Nino. That is nowhere near the case, and I'll show you why here in a minute, because the data doesn't support it. The modeling now supports El Nino continuing but fading late winter and into the spring, early summer period. And one measure that is the multivariate ENSO index, or we call it the MEI. And basically what this does is it is a way to measure how much the atmosphere is responding to an El Nino, how much the atmosphere is responding to a La Nina. What that means is the atmosphere responding to these changes in the sea surface temperatures. And if you have a strong MEI index, positive or negative, it means the atmosphere is responding. And if the atmosphere is responding, you're going to get the weather phenomenon associated with La Nina or El Nino. So it's a good way to measure, yeah, we've got an El Nino, but how strong or weak is it? That's basically what this index is used to do. So when we put it together, it's a good measure is it going to be a super El Nino, a weak one, or a moderate one? And we're starting to see how this MEI index is responding to it. And as you can see, we had a very strong signal with that La Nina, and that's why that La Nina was so impactful. But if you look right here, notice we have this spike, but it's not as big or as long-lasting as what we've had here previously. If you look at the strong El Nino that we had in late 2015 and 16, it was much stronger. Also, the one that we had going to late 2018 and 2019 was stronger and maybe lasted a little bit longer. So if we compare this El Nino status to where we've been in the past, it's not nearly as intense. Hence, that hype of the super El Nino is just incorrect, just wrong. And if you look at where we are right now on the index, this is where we are right now in the gray line. If we compare this El Nino to previous El Nino years, you can see we're just tracking right along the edge of the bottom here before we'll see that peel on off. So what's this mean? This means that this El Nino is a weak to moderate one. Not a strong one, certainly not a super one. So we are going to certainly have El Nino impacts this winter and into early spring, but it's not off the chart strong. Here's the index right now, 0.6, and you can see how long we were negative, and those strong negative signals began to fade, and this is when the weather really changed for the western United States. We started to see the index drop steadily, and January, February, March, April, May is when we started to see the big snows in the west and the changes that were going on now. So this 0.6 puts it right in the moderate range, but if you compare to where we were in 2019, we were at 0.5 and 0.7, and then if you look back to we showed you that stronger one all the way through here. So yes, we've got an El Nino. Yes, it will have impacts, but it's not a strong one or super one, but it will be impacting the weather in the west, and we'll have more of this to talk about later. Have yourself a good Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow.